Television executives would want to rewrite Gone with the Wind. If they had the old man in the sea, they'd say to the author, Ernie, we love it, but the part about the fish is boring. And the man is too old. He should have a girlfriend. Jim Bouton, Ball 4. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Shymanski. Friend of the show, Jeff Rainey, is on the show today for another rapid fire review. How's it going, Jeff? Been a while.
It has been a while, but things are going good, Jacob.
I have to thank you for something because last time around, you were on with a whole bunch of baseball book recommendations for a rapid fire review. I encourage anyone to check that episode out. But you brought my attention to Ball 4 by Jim Bouton, which is a baseball book, a legendary baseball book. I'm not really a baseball fan, but I am loving this thing. I'm about halfway through. My brother also recommended it to me on top of yours. So it came in very well reviewed and recommended. Absolutely lived up to it. Or what an absolute banger of a book. Now, the thing is, I don't know if I'm loving this book because I'm fascinated by baseball or it's just a really good book. I'm thinking it's maybe a bit of both. Like, what is it about that book that you liked, Ball 4?
Yeah, it probably is a bit of both. I think your story is a lot like many people who read it. At any point in time, my friend Chris actually recommended it to me. We reconnected because at the time I was going around sending out a petition that was trying to bring baseball back to radio. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you were a Blue Jays fan." I'm like, "I didn't know you were either." But and he'd recommended it to me one time. We were actually at a Jays game and we were just sort of talking, and he said, "Oh, here's like a couple of books you might want to read." And but I think too, like, you know, even if this, because this was 1969 and most of the players are sort of just names in time now, and some of the teams are no longer there. Some of them are. But it's just funny. It's funny. It's
hilarious.
It's funny. There's a lot of daily life that goes on. You know, anything from a game that goes awry to, you know, someone who's been sent down for the third time after they just bought a house in Seattle. You know, there's a lot of just, you know, coming and going that's going on. And yeah.
And Jim Bouton himself is quite the character. He's kind of a loudmouth, I'll tell you like it is type of person that he seems to really like piss off a lot of people. He doesn't really care. He's very self-aware, but he's also super smart and kind of arrogant, but also very realistic at the same time. Like, he's down to earth and humble and arrogant all at the same time. It makes no sense, but he's like quite the character. But more than anything, what's notable about Ball 4 is that it's like very irreverent for the sport, and it came out during a time where there was this image of baseball, the way he put it, this like a gee whiz, aw shucks attitude around baseball, where it was like very wholesome and family friendly, but he completely popped the lid on that one and let the worms out of the can, showing that baseball players are not family friendly at all, doing a bunch of really sketchy stuff, but it's partly what makes them funny, that they're these very complex characters. And he's such a funny writer too. One of my favorite lines was he was quoting a manager. He's saying, "We got a kid here named Pearson. He's 20 years old, and in 10 years, he's got a chance to be 30. In other words, he has a chance to achieve absolutely nothing worthwhile. But it's full of amazing quotes like that. So highly recommend Ball 4 by Jim Bouton. But you've got 5 more books that we're going to be featuring through a rapid fire review. A handful of these are baseball books as well, a memoir and a political biography. So a little bit of everything. Are you all set, Jeff?
Yeah, any chance at trying to link these together has kind of gone away. We've been able to do that before. I don't think we're able to do that this time. I guess identity is the kind of main core that goes for all of them, but that's about it.
Okay, I had that same thought, actually. We'll get back to that. So for the people who aren't aware, Rapid Fire Review is our segment where our guest brings us 5 titles, 5 of their most recent notable reads, and we go through them one by one for each book. Jeff is going to have 15 seconds to give us a synopsis, review, top of mind thoughts on the book while he hears this sound effect go through. Once you hear ding, Jeff, you can finish your sentence. But the idea is to keep it real short, under 15 seconds. Go through each book like that. And then afterwards, We can elaborate on all of them. Don't worry about it. It's just this first part, we get through it fast. All right, here we go. The first book is Beautiful Scars, Steeltown Secrets, Mohawk Skywalkers, and The Road Home by Tom Wilson.
So I came across this book looking for Canadian autobiographies, and the thing that struck me first was not knowing who the man is. His voice sounded eerily like my next door neighbor, but it is a story of identity, growing up as an adopted son in Hamilton, and discovering his Mohawk origins on the Ganawake Reserve in Montreal.
Yeah, he thought he was Irish his entire life. Suddenly realized he was actually Mohawk, which is interesting for that kind of crazy background story to happen to someone who was a famous Canadian at one point. So that's Beautiful Scars by Tom Wilson. The next book is Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton.
Oh boy. Pierre Poilievre is obviously someone who's in the spotlight right now, but this book is fascinating. His convictions are the exact same as 30 years ago when he was a young reformer, and this book goes through basically a timeline of his political career and what he's like as a man.
Oh, that could not have been more perfect. So there is another book that we reviewed on this channel, Ripper, the story of Pierre Poilievre by Mark Rory, which those two books are different memoirs in that one of them is quite clearly right-leaning, the other one is quite left-leaning. We'll analyze that a little later.
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton. The next book is Big Hair and Plastic Grass, A Funky Ride Through Baseball in America in the Swinging 70s, written by Dan Epstein.
So, kind of banking on what we were talking about with Ball 4, this decade exploded in popularity. The shackles were off. You got everything from owners who ran their ballparks like one-man circuses to disco demolition nights to player strikes and everything in between.
What the hell is a disco demolition night?
I have no idea. I'm still in the chapter 3 of this book, but I came across it by accident, just browsing Audible with random word searches, and it was just, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be, howls and good times. And one thing I forgot was the pitcher who threw a no-hitter on LSD. That's Doc Ellis.
Well, maybe that's the secret. Okay, so that's Big Hair and Plastic Grass, A Funky Ride Through Baseball in America in the Swinging 70s by Dan Epstein. The next book is Home Games, Two Baseball Wives Speak Out by Bobbie Bouton and Nancy Marshall.
So if the name Bouton sounds familiar, it is Jim Bouton's wife and Mike Marshall's wife. This is an encounter of what it was like for two baseball wives while their husbands were out on the road making a living, or something close to it, and marriage.
So this is interesting because nowadays on TikTok, it's very popular to see, at least I've seen on my feed, a lot of hockey wag content. A wag is a hockey wife, like a professional hockey player's wife. And it's like a whole lifestyle, being the wife of a professional athlete. Super strange. This book seems to be like kind of ahead of its time in that sense. So that's Home Games, Two Baseball Wives Speak Out by Bobbie Bouton and Nancy Marshall. Finally, the last one we have today is The Best Team Money Can Buy by Molly Knight.
So Mark Walter, who now owns the PWHL and the Los Angeles Lakers as well, bought the Dodgers in 2012 from thrifty owner Frank McCourt, was determined to build a superstar team, and there are some things money can't buy and some that it can't.
Okay, we'll get back to that one. Let's go back to the top of the list here. Tell me more about the Tom Wilson book. Like, this is a biography, right? It's an autobiography. Did he write it himself?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So what's the deal with it? Like, okay, how about this? What's the extended description? Like, what is this thing?
He grew up in a family where he looked nothing like the people both in his immediate family and around the town of Hamilton. This is in 1959, and his parents were in their early 50s and late 40s at the time, and they came from very different backgrounds and ended up having a kid almost by accident. Or at least that's what it kind of makes you to believe at the beginning. He really grew up for a quest for identity. He later found it through music, but just, everything in his life was a quest for truth. He was looking through, everything through answers, whether if it was vices and addiction, whether if it was wild women. He eventually did marry and have kids, but at that time, he's still trying to make it as a starving artist per se. Eventually he does, and his mother refused to tell him about, there are secrets of you that I'll take to my grave, she'd always tell him. And that really sort of closed the door on any sort of, where do I come from type of story, until his cousin Jamie eventually revealed that he actually comes from the Kanawake Reserve, which is a Mohawk reserve and long-standing cultural habitat, and I believe it's in Montreal. So coming from Montreal to Hamilton is quite in the early '60s. This is like working class Hamilton.
Like pretty different than Montreal around the time. We're talking about Beautiful Scars by Tom Wilson, by the way. And forgive my ignorance, Tom Wilson was a musician, right? Like, what was he known for?
Yeah, and I had no idea of who he was either.
Okay.
When I saw Tom Wilson, the first thing I thought of was Tom Wilson, the hockey player, the enforcer who's out there now. But no, he was. I think the biggest thing he's known for is the band Junk House, which had a song. It's just a matter of time.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember the lyrics of the chorus, but yeah, that. He was in a couple of other bands too. I think it was like Blackie and the Wild Kings, and he toured a lot with like Jan Arden and a bunch of different musicians. But really, it was a life's hustle to try and make it big. And by the time he made it big, the world of music, like the industry and like his, the addiction that it would help feed with drugs and alcohol just really ate him up. And so he's on top of the world, and then it collapses. The other thing about this book that I didn't anticipate when I picked it up, but I'm really glad it's in there, is basically a first-person view inside rehab. His wife, his friends, his band manager really wanted him to get better just because of how much disturbance he was causing and destruction. So he actually went into rehab, and it shows basically the insides of there. It's not very. It's a very brief chapter. It's not very. It's not revealing. It's not like an expose. It's just very like matter of fact on here's what you go through. And
it's not the type of thing you always get an in on. And so that's something I always appreciate in a biography or autobiographies, because they have a tendency to be a bit formulaic, right? People who write an autobiography come in with the assumption that people are fascinated by who you are as a person. But I think any good autobiography has to do more than just that. It has to tell a story and teach people about things. And it can be really niche things. It's just a book can never be just one thing if it wants to be successful. And it sounds like that's what that chapter did for you, because it kind of gave you that first person perspective of what rehab is like. I've never seen anything like that in a book before. So I see like where that's coming from. That's Beautiful Scars by Tom Wilson, which was pretty well received when it first came out in 2017. It was CBC's Book of the Year in 2017 as well. So pretty well recognized. Any final words on that one?
Yeah, I think that opened up another chapter of recognition for Tom, because now, excuse me, I looked it up on YouTube just to see if there was any follow-ups or any interviews, post book sale coming out. And there's actually a documentary that TVO had done on him, basically following him around. And he's done, various interviews about his life's journey. It's like I'm 62 years old and I'm still finding out who my family is. This journey wild. Started like 10 years ago, and it's amazing. It's
Okay, next book on the list is Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton. And I alluded earlier that there was another biography that came out just before the election that we reviewed on the show. It was a Ripper by Mark Rory. So Ripper is very not flattering towards Pierre Poilievre. And in reviews, I've seen that this one, Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life, is rather flattering. So two sides of the same coin. Was that your view of this one? Was it like very flattering towards him?
For the most part, yes. I'd say it kind of
Hmm.
gives him the benefit of the doubt. There are times where he'll point blank say, like, this was an example where, Poilievre, he could have used better judgment, or one of the few mistakes he made. And so it's not like
Hmm.
it's not like blind to him as a human, but it is definitely more it is more forgiving, very liberal about him, pardon the pun. But it's interesting. I saw interviews with Andrew Lawton afterwards, mostly because I wanted to know more about him as a writer, and he says that he went into this um excuse me, part of with sort of a, he's like, I didn't want to try and hide my partisan lens to it. He's like, I didn't want to try and be as neutral as possible, just because I felt that the book wasn't necessarily about me, it was about the writer himself. But yes, there
Hmm.
are bits of editorial as well, especially to the opposition, like, this was what was, this is what Pierre decided to do, but this is what the others were doing as well, so it's not really that radical. But by and large, it's a really good at least um, I guess just getting to know who the man is, even if you don't agree with him. I told someone, I said, if Mark Carney's book Values is Mr. Rogers, then Pierre Poilievre is the Grinch.
Values is an interesting book in its own. It's been at the top of the Canadian nonfiction list on the Globe and Mail for about a month now. More than that, actually. It's been selling super well, even though it came out like 2019, 2020 or something like that. Um, Not because it's a good book, but because people
Quite
want
the
to know
opposite.
what
It's
the hell.
very dry.
Yeah.
I read it and I told someone, I said, it's the part where it
Yeah.
starts to really get good is 7 hours in of a 20-hour. It's like when someone says, I've got this, this great series that I want you to watch. It takes, the first 5 seasons are a little slow, but once you get past that, it's really good.
That means the show is not good. If it takes
Yeah,
5 seasons to
exactly.
get good, that means the show is not good. Same thing
Yeah.
with values. By
And
and
I
large.
really think too that, yeah, it does help you to get a background on the man, but I really think that if he had to write it again after his bid for prime minister, I think it would come out a lot more charismatic, because even if you look at his early performances when he was on the Daily Show that really kicked off his campaign, he was still a little jumpy and
Yeah,
nervous. He wasn't
100%.
someone who was accustomed to being in public forums. He was always used to, he was someone who was, in the background, help, really uh, orchestrating things. He was more of a builder than he was a persona, a
Yeah,
personality.
positions of power, but not necessarily as a front facing role. Very different. And you're so right. I do remember that Daily Show appearance. He did not look particularly comfortable, unlike Pierre Poilievre, who always looks like he's comfortable in front of the camera. That guy
Yeah,
loves the camera.
yeah, and he's always been that way. And it's funny because there are parts of him that are, that kind of humanize him on the other sense. Like he when when he joined the Reform Party, he was on the phone to residents in Alberta, and he really got to know them. He really got them to just tell him what was going on in their lives, what was difficult, what they would like to see better, and he really compelled them to join the party. Even as a young intern, who he was like setting records for sales and donations and stuff. And then he had his child when she was born. She was diagnosed with severe autism, and that was part of the decision that led him not to run for the 2020 leadership bid after Andrew Scheer had lost and Aaron O'Toole was eventually elected. I also saw him, during the election campaign. I was like, okay, we know what the Liberals are thinking on the disability front. What does Poilievre think of at all? And the first thing that came up was just almost like a political luncheon that he was doing. And I saw someone from the CNIB who was front and center, and the whole thing was a reasonable discussion. I'm like, where is this guy when the cameras are on him? This is a guy who does not want this side of him to be known. He wants to be the ringmaster. He wants to hold you feet to the fire, and that's the kind of person he would have you know. It's fascinating how much he really spends as much time working, speaking to others as he does working on his own identity. It's fascinating.
And that's an image that was made clear to me in Ripper, the book that wasn't particularly favorable to him. But one thing that seems to be clear in both of these books is that Pierre Poilievre, if he's anything, it's consistent. He's been very consistent on his views for his almost like 30 years in politics at this point. In Ripper, one of the things that came through to me was that he's known for being an attack dog, and he has completely eviscerated people's careers like on his way to the top. In being the conservatives attack dog, he really like ruined people's lives almost. Like he's completely ruthless just to get a few political points, and the book just points out like he's really like screwed up like quite a few people, and that's like one of the most scathing aspects of that book. But you cannot deny that he is effective at what he does.
An attack dog for him is better than a purse dog or a bag dog.
Yeah, if you had to pick one of them, I guess. So that's Pierre Poilievre, A Political Life by Andrew Lawton. Okay, we have a couple baseball books to run through. Which of the three baseball books did you want to like highlight here?
Let's do The Best Team Money Can Buy.
Yeah, sure. That was the fifth one on the list. The Best Team Money Can Buy by Molly Knight.
So, again, Mark Walter and Guggenheim Management purchased the Dodgers in 2012 after, it had been run for nearly a decade under a very wealthy realtor named Frank McCourt, but who was very thrifty with his team and almost used the team's finances to fund his own life. And this group was determined to build a team of superstars that was going to go out and win the World Series. Even they hadn't been there for 3 months. They were already making big trades with teams, taking on player salaries that, small market teams wouldn't, which before they were trying to get, other teams to take care of the salaries themselves. I think it was the Padres said, you guys are the biggest team in baseball and you're asking a small market team to take on this player's payroll when we trade him to you. Because that's what they were left with under the McCourt regime. Wow. So these guys were not afraid to flex their financial muscle. And again, there are some things money can buy, like great players and that scouts think very highly of in free agency, but there are others that they can't, such as injuries, culture clashes, and some more injuries as well. And so this book covers the 2013 through 15 seasons, and there's a lot of ups and downs, rocky roads. There was a young Mexican drafted player they brought on named Yasiel Puig, who I think Vince Scully, the broadcaster, termed him as the wild horse. This guy was raw. He was 16, maybe 17 years old. He had grown up as a star his whole life. Now he's in a completely different country. Excellent player, very, very difficult to work with. He was still a child in a ways, but they needed him. They were desperate.
16.
And maybe he was 18, but still, he might as well have been 15 years old. It's amazing how this team, I think they got as far as the finals or maybe the semifinals, but they never actually got over the hump.
Interesting, because you see this in a lot of sports. The teams that spend $1 billion but still don't really win. I'm thinking about like Paris Saint-Germain in soccer. That's the other sport that has basically no salary cap. So, that's at least in soccer, but it's a dynamic you see in all sorts of sports. But even somebody like me who doesn't really know all that much about baseball knows that the Los Angeles Dodgers are kind of known for this. But then again, so are the Los Angeles Angels, aren't they? Because they had like superstars and still didn't win anything.
Yeah, and they're interesting because their problem is keeping talent. They have things that keep your hopes up, but they never really. It's like having a potential, but never really capitalizing on it. They've kind of been in this limbo They did win a World Series in 2002, but that was 2002.
It was more than 20 years ago. My God, Time goes by fast. Can I hear more about this? Big hair and plastic grass, a funky ride through baseball in America in the swinging 70s. Apparently this one has a pitcher who pitched a no-hitter on LSD. Why?
Yes, Doc Ellis. He was someone who was experimenting with psychedelics, and it was actually by accident. He didn't intend to do that, but he thought
he did it by accident. Sure.
Yeah. Well, he didn't do the LSD by accident, but he thought that he would, okay, I'm supposed to pitch on Friday and it's Wednesday, but he actually slept through all of Thursday. So he had, he was basically just caught in a pickle, like, oh, I guess I got to do it now. And Robin Williams had a great sketch on Doc Ellis himself, what it's like to pitch on LSD. Like you're walking out of the grass, apologizing to it with every step you take, and yeah, the ball is like, I can't remember, like the ball is like a beach ball. Everything's moving in slow motion, but it really kind of, if Ball 4 unlocked peeled back the curtains of the baseball establishment, then 1970s was like the Wild West. You've got Marvin Miller and the union and the players union that really pushed back against owners, tight-wadded negotiation tactics and bullying in some ways. And so players are now able to go to free agency. You had new owners like Charlie Finley, who owned the Oakland A's, now the Sacramento Athletics, the Oakland Athletics, I guess. And he really just, any idea that he had, whether if it was to change the color of the uniforms, to have a 3-pitch walk, to have the players ride mules onto the field, to have a rabbit come up and act as a ball boy, he brought everything to the table and everything he did. I'm still going through this book. I have no idea how the disco demolition played out, but that is another thing. The uniforms changed, and AstroTurf really became a thing. So the stadiums went from lush ballparks to indoor stadiums with AstroTurf and
artificial grass.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where the title comes from as well, and that brought its own brand of baseball too.
There's something about the 70s that, as somebody who was born in 1996, like I kind of look back at that decade as something special. I don't really care about the 50s and 60s or the 80s or 90s in for any particular reason, but there's something about the 70s where it just feels like everything was just wild. Like there seemed to be this sense of optimism and cautiousness at the same time that led to like some really wild stuff in history. I don't know. The 70s is just always a really good setting to me in books, especially if it's a nonfiction like this one. Jeff, I wanted to bring your attention to one more book. I haven't read it, but I know it's been making a lot of noise lately in Canada. There's a new book that came out in June called The Franchise, The Toronto Blue Jays, a curated history of the Jays by Keegan Matheson, which is a collection of essays about the Toronto Blue Jays from like a fan's perspective. Apparently it's very good. I heard some really good things about it. Jeff, thank you so much for coming back on. We're all out of time. We'll do it again sometime soon, man. Always appreciate your recommendations. And honestly, Ball 4 might be one of my favorite books this year so far. Amazing read. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jacob. We'll do it again.
Yeah, of course. That was friend of the show, Jeff Rainey, with his rapid fire review. We're going to make sure to include all of his selections in the podcast description and YouTube description. And that's all the time we have for today's episode. AMI Audiobook Review airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours. But we also make ourselves easy to find. We're on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. So you can subscribe to the channel while you're there. You can send us feedback via email at audiobookreview@ami.ca. That's audiobookreview@ami.ca. I was your host, Jacob Shymanski. Thanks for listening.